Happy Monday, everybody. This is Michele with Fun in Key West, and welcome back to another episode of Historic Marker Monday. And today we are at the Patterson Baldwin house, also known as the island's first schoolhouse. I know you've seen this house. It's on Duval, and it's the two-story house that has the school bell at the top. And the school bell is there because it was a schoolhouse. Interesting notes. So let's go dive into the history of this house. It was built around 1838, which makes it one of Key West's oldest surviving structures. Originally, and like we talk about this all the time, originally this was a small 1.5 story cottage with front and side porches. Well, it was obviously enlarged, like a lot of Key West homes. In 1846, we had the devastating hurricane that hit and destroyed a lot of Key West buildings. Alexander Patterson, who was the former mayor of Key West, relocated the house, which survived, most of it survived the structure, to its current location, which is at 336 Duval Street, which is the corner of Duval and Eaton after the hurricane. Then in, 1847, Mr. and Mrs. Penkenny, yeah, let's go Penkenny. If I get that wrong, just let me know. Resided in the cottage, and Mr. Penkenny's sister, Madam Passaloque, began conducting classes there, establishing it as the island's first schoolhouse. She taught there until 1860, which actually was before the formal organization of the Florida public school system came into play, which is about 1870s. And like I said before, the original school bell still hangs above the second-story porch. And so when you go out on like the conch train tour or you're walking up and down Duval, look up. You'd be amazed at what you see. But the school bell's there, and it harkens back to the history of this house. Then in 1860, John P. Baldwin, who claimed he was an aristocrat with British lineage, purchased the property. He and his wife was a music teacher, and they had 3 daughters who were also school teachers. And so they lived in the house for a while. During the Civil War, though, the Baldwin family moved temporarily to the Bahamas, but afterwards returned back to Key West. Then in 1867, here's where we talk about the expansion. The Baldwins expanded the home with a 2-story addition at the front, making it much more prominent. You have to have, if you're from British lineage, of course you're going to have a prominent house. Interesting to note, the house remained in the Baldwin family for 102 years. That's what I find fascinating as we start to dig into the history of these homes, is these homes stayed within families and were private residences for such a long time. There wasn't a lot of turnover. When you look at the house today, just like most houses in Key West, there's this blend of styles. You've got classic revival, and then you have a lot of the Bahamian influences. You have obviously the metal roof because that's mandated in Key West. You have the 2-story gallery, and you have these long windows and shutters. And keep in mind, those long windows and shutters and those really tall balconies created the ability for the winds and that tropical breeze to blow through the house to keep it cool. This was another home that was absolutely would not be here today if it was not for the preservation efforts that occurred in the 1960s in Key West. Joan and Edward Knight acquired the property in 1962, and it had suffered neglect. There was a fire in it. When you look at it, you've got the add-ons and the additions, and it just was in awful shape. And what Mr. Knight did was actually very inspiring and should be, I think, the game plan and the blueprint for a lot of other communities. to encourage the preservation and to encourage the city and the people in the community to say, hey, these buildings are worth saving, he restored the front of the house. Not necessarily all of the back and the inside, but he restored the front of the house so it didn't look so bad. And he landscaped the front yard, and he left the Eaton side of the house, or the other side of the house, looking like it was absolutely original and needed all that repair. So he put up a sign that said before and after house. So preservationists and those that had an interest in preserving the history of these homes could see this is the possibility without going full in. This initiative that Mr. Knight did gathered and put together a national attention to historic homes. And that's part of what played the pivotal role in launching Key West Historic Preservation Program. When people come together and say, we don't want to lose these homes or the history that's attached to these homes, and they step forward and do something to show what's possible, you get a lot more people on board. This house had quite the journey. It was a small little cottage, and then the hurricane came, and then it was moved, and then it became the island's first school. And then it sparked the preservation movement, and its legacy is part of that. I encourage you, as you start to walk through Key West, it is such a unique experience to really absorb and take in these homes. Part of the process of the preservation of these homes, and you'll see it a lot of times as you start to walk through some of the neighborhoods and the neighborhood streets, is the fronts and the outside structures of the home have to remain intact. When you go on and you dream about living in Key West or buying a property in Key West, and then you see how up to date and modern some of the places are inside, that's because you're allowed to do that inside, but the outside structure needs to look like it did. It keeps the history of the town the way it's supposed to be. Do you lose some things whenever you redo the insides? Yeah, I think you do. But some of these homes had been neglected and needed a lot of repair, and some of it just honestly wasn't going to happen. But some of the preservationists are able to capture and keep some of the things that made the home unique, made it stand out, made it be what it is, and add that vibe and that really cool thing that makes these Key West homes Key West homes. Also, read the signs, those little historic markers. It's a free walking tour, and you'll never know who you're going to read about and the home that it is and the story behind the home. And then as you're over at Mallory Square, walk over into the sculpture garden. A lot of the people who built Key West and the founders of Key West, can be found over in the sculpture garden, and you get to meet them, see what they were like, what they looked like, so they're more than just a name on a marker. I think it's just a cool thing. I'm a total geeking out, I get it, on the history and the architecture of Key West, and I hope that is something that sparks you as well. If you want to do more of those self-guided tours of historic walking tours, head over to FunInKeyWest.com. If you click under what to do, there is the historic walking tour, and there's a bunch of places that you can explore and check out. There's also recommendations there on where to eat and where to drink, and also under what to do is you can book your tours. We work with amazing tour partners, and I encourage you to go check that out because you can book right there. And especially if it's a bucket list item like a sandbar excursion, I highly recommend Make It So Charters for that. Sign up for our newsletter and be in the know of what's happening. Meanwhile, you guys have a great Monday. Again, thank you for stopping in for another Historic Marker Monday episode. You all have a great one, and we will see you later.